Selectmen's meeting for November 13th, 2017 back to order. We started tonight's meeting in executive session where we discussed land purchase, two separate properties. One we've tabled, an owner's unknown piece, until next week when the real estate and open space can be before us. On the Judah Eldridge property off Queen Anne Road, the board voted to fully support continuing to go for CPC funds to purchase that property. We also discussed some union issues for HEA. One was to approve a side letter of agreement for a job description change, and the other one is still in negotiation, so I won't mention it. We will be voting confirming the vote in the consent agenda for the HEA union piece that we did change. With that, notifying you that we will be video and audio taping as well as live broadcasting this public meeting. In addition, anyone in the audience wishing to video or audio tape must notify the chairman now. Hearing no one, please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First up, tonight's weekly briefing. Anyone for weekly briefing? Public comment and announcement. Anyone for public comment and announcement? It's going to go quick. Yeah. Moving on to the consent agenda. Larry?
Mr. Chair, I move the following consent agenda items. A, approve the minutes of October 30, 2017 regular meeting. B, approve the nomination of Kathleen Derwin Miranda for the Harwich Hall of Fame. C, approve and sign the contract for Forte Landscaping and Construction for supply and installation of playground equipment at Brooks Park in the amount of $69,995. D, confirm approval of the side letter of agreement with the HEA union.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. One abstention. Next up is public hearings and presentations. So the first one is a public hearing. It's a classification hearing for the Board of Assessors. Larry, will you read the hearing notice?
I will as soon as I bring it up. Okay. Mr. Chair, the Board of Selectmen, Harwich Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing on Monday, November 13, 2017, no earlier than 6:30 p.m. during the regular scheduled meeting. The hearing will be in the Don B. Griffin Room located at the Town Hall, 732 Main Street, Harwich, for the purpose of deciding whether all property shall be taxed at the same rate for fiscal year 2018 as set forth in Chapter 40, Section 56 of the Massachusetts General Laws. All members of the public having an interest in this topic are cordially invited to attend the public hearing and provide information and testimony relevant to this matter. Signed by the Harwich Board of Selectmen.
Public hearing is open. Richard Waystack.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Richard Waystack for the Board of Assessors. I'm joined tonight by Vice Chairman Bruce Nightingale, Jay Kavanaugh, our assessor, Donna Molino, and of course, our Director of Finance. We're here before you as we are every year. As a classification hearing, we determine in the community how we tax our taxpayers. And at a duly posted meeting of the Board of Assessors, we as a board voted unanimously to recommend to you, the Board of Selectmen, that we select a factor of 1, which means that we tax all of our properties at the same rate. 2 years ago, we did a substantial study about this to see if we made a change in how we tax our community, could we best impact the people of the town of Harwich. And we found that by taxing everyone the same, it was the fairest method. And it came up that there are some residents of the community who still struggle. And at the time, we came up with a couple of new ideas to impact the people who need our help the most. And we have found that, frankly, many of those are the seniors of our community. So we initiated a town meeting article, and we actually enabled legislation in the legislature to allow any community to increase the senior tax credits that we give to the seniors of our community who are deserving and who meet the criteria. All told, the people of this community that you help as a town through our overlay fund, we help over 275 people with various tax credits, with programs to help those with sight impaired who are veterans. It's a lot of people. The study made us realize as a board that we need to continue taxing our taxpayers here in the community at the same rate. And the major reason for that is we do not have extensive commercial or industrial property that would offset doing an exemption for either residential, small business, or open space. So, Mr. Chairman, we are here before you tonight to make a recommendation that we select a factor of 1, taxing all property at the same rate, that we do not grant an open space exemption, that we do not grant a residential exemption, that we do not grant a small commercial exemption, and that you authorize the assessor, Donna Molino, to sign the LA5 on the Department of Revenue Gateway on behalf of the Board of Selectmen. That ends my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Richard. Anyone in the public have anything on this? Board?
I don't.
All set? Julie, all set? Janelle?
All set, thank
Don?
you.
Can I get a motion on this? There's a pre-made
sure.
motion in the packet. The only thing I would ask is on 5 that we add Donna Melito's title to that. Yes.
Mr. Chair, I move that we, one, select, do I have to read the whole thing?
Mhm.
One, select a factor of 1, taxing all property at the same rate. 2, that we do not grant an open space exemption. 3, that we do not grant a residential exemption. 4, that we do not grant a small commercial exemption. And 5, that we vote to authorize Assessor Donna Molino to sign the LA5 on DOR Gateway on behalf of the selectmen.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the motion as read. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All set. Thank you, Donna.
You don't trust us, huh?
She's still on the clock.
Thank you, Donna.
That's our pen for signature folder?
Yeah. Okay, next up is the presentation on Fire Station 2.
Mr. Chairman and the board, we're going to, you're going to have a presentation tonight by your building committee. Craig Chadwick is the chairman of that committee, and he'll be introducing the architects for that. You'll be given a brief summary of how we've gotten to tonight. I do want to mention, because I've been asked, and rightly so, is that I stood before you and was adamant about the $4 million. And I take full responsibility for that. It's not the town administrator, it's not the board, it's not the committee. That was my number. That number was arrived through consultation with professionals, and it was, sadly to say, a year and a half to 2 years old, and things have changed. I did watch the presentation by Mr. Sanborn from the tech school, and I wanted to copy everything he said, because I'm glad he was the first, not me. So there were some mistakes made, but I am passionate about this project, and I am passionate to do it. The best thing for the fire department, the best thing for the town, and we absolutely will have kept the taxpayer in mind, but this project is desperately needed. And with that, I'd like to introduce the chairman.
Thank you, Norm.
Thank you, Chief. Craig Chadwick, Station 2 Committee. First, I'd like to introduce the members of the committee. Not everyone's here tonight, but just to give you a rundown who's on the committee. John Clark, Sean Libby, Joe McParland, Joe Rigo, Scott Tilsley, Richard Waystack is our vice chairman, and I'm the chairman of the committee. Tonight, we have representatives from Castle Booze Architects, Todd Costa, who is the associate principal, resident architect, and Zach Silva, the project manager. Very quickly, I'd like to take a minute and talk to you about the purpose of this presentation today. It's to provide an update to you on the committee's progress since last time we met, and actually when we went to town meeting for approval of the design, concept and design work and choice of an architect. We also would like to request your approval to move forward with the committee's recommendation for the new construction option. The committee has been guided by the following requirements, which at a minimum are essential to a successful project: building code and safety compliance, fire station best practices for usability, energy efficiency and environmentally friendly, financially feasible, reuse and repurpose where and when it makes sense, and obviously maintain the highest level of service to the community. Brief background, in May of 2017, town meeting and town election authorized $310,000 for architectural and engineering design and bid-ready plans. In July and August of 2017, a request for proposal was advertised. We received 18 requests for information and the RFP document. We received back in 6 completed proposals. We ended up interviewing 4 firms, and the committee recommended to the Board of Selectmen that we go with Castle Booze Associates. In September, the Board of Selectmen approved and contracted with KBA. And then we put the pedal to the metal. In September and October 2017, the committee worked with KBA to provide further information to develop design and cost estimate options. At the last committee meeting on October 17th, KBA presented the options and cost estimates to the committee. The committee voted unanimously to recommend the total new construction option, which you'll see as the folks from KBA go through their presentation. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to our architects from KBA, Todd Costa and Zach Silva. And I'd also just like to mention that we're happy to have hired KBA, and they've sort of reinforced our decision in that they were recently awarded the Gold Award for design from Firehouse Station Design Awards magazine for the Carver Fire Department project that they've done. And Todd was instrumental in that as the lead project manager. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Board of Selectmen members, for having us here today. Again, my name's Todd Costa. I'm the associate principal in charge of the project. And to my left here is Zach Sylvia. He is the project manager for our office. If the name seems a little bit familiar to you folks, it's because about 9 years ago, we worked on the police station project in town. And one of the things that we pride ourselves on is coming back and doing repeat business with the same communities. And I was more than ecstatic to get the opportunity to work with Harwich Fire Department and Harwich community again. So without further ado, so the first things here that we're going to basically look at, is the basically the tasks, the outline of what we went through, which was, some of the items that we have here is the current cost trends, your total project cost versus your construction cost, the multiple design options that we went through, kind of the outcome that got us to where we are today, and the summary of the options with the assumed cost. Just a quick dialogue, the current costing trends. We're out of the recession. Contractors are filling their books, and they're now starting to take jobs. at, a benefit to them. We're no longer are we at the point where contractors are gonna do the work just to keep their guys busy. They're now starting to pad their pad their pockets, excuse me. The other challenge that we have with Station 2 is it's a smaller project. What that basically means is you don't get the efficiency of design or the efficiency of dollar per square foot value that you would on a larger scale project, i.e. the school project or even a larger police station project like we did a few years ago. Renovation costs are almost equivalent to that, and there's a lot more challenges that you run into in a renovation project. A lot more sins buried in the walls over 40-something years that we can't see with a naked eye in the beginning. The difference between construction costs and total project costs, and this is just kind of an outline for what we look at. Construction cost is the hard bid number. That's what you're going to get from a contractor. That includes all of their markups, their fees, and the nuts and bolts to put the whole building together. The total project cost is the contractor's hard number, the construction cost, plus all of the soft costs. That is going to be your architect's fees, your land surveys, your geotechnical surveys, your furniture, fixtures, and equipment, as well as some specialty equipment and some contingency to cover the project for any unforeseen conditions that may pop up from the ground if we do decide to go forward with the totally new project. So as you can see here, this is your existing building footprint. Currently, you have about 3,300 square feet of apparatus bay and about 2,200 square feet of living space for the department. Our initial study, where we went through with the department and asked them, what do you need to operate? What's in the 21st Century Fire Department for you? So that's about 3,100 square feet of additional apparatus-based storage, as well as operational space, things like the self-contained breathing apparatus room, a proper area that gets the turnout gear off of the apparatus bay floor so it's not getting contaminated by diesel fumes or being degraded by UV light. Natural sunlight will degrade the turnout gear. Your existing 3,300 square feet of apparatus bay floor, and we're cleaning that up, getting all that storage stuff. What we like to say is there's nothing in the apparatus bay floor except wheels and feet. Clean it up, make it a safer environment for the department. Renovating the 2,200 square feet of existing dormitory space that they have and making that into day room functions and first aid room, things of that nature. And then adding on another 2,800 square feet, almost 3,000, of dormitory space, beds, not gear lockers, but lockers for their clean area, gear and uniforms, showers, toilet rooms. And what you will see in this is we're using individual stall toilet rooms so that they become unisex, and we can be much more effective and much more efficient with space, as well as the meeting space and a lobby area, as well as a police patrol room. This results, as you can see at the top, in about $6.6 million. So that immediately threw up a red flag to us to say, hey, time out. We're well in excess of what the budget is, and this is just meeting the 21st century program of the department. So a couple of things that's not included within this is we went from 40 lockers for both operational, adjacent to the dormitories, as well as turnout gear, down to 30. That was all the department. They already started to see that we needed to trim back a little bit. We also went to a no basement scheme. Everybody feels as though basement in a building like this is just common sense. The good use of money, good use of funds. Basements in commercial buildings or municipal buildings aren't your typical 8 foot. You're not digging down another 4 feet. You're digging down another 10 feet to get a basement to accommodate all the mechanical systems and things of that nature. So we're looking at all of this immediately and trimming that back to make the building as efficient as possible. Oh, the other key thing to remind you is that program, because we were using some inefficiencies in the existing building, was upwards in the area of about 11,000 square feet. So now for looking at this, it's okay, we took a step back. What can we get what can we build for the department and for the town of Harwich in order to fit within that $4 million budget? Well, basically what you're looking at is you're looking at cleaning up your existing apparatus bay floor area. You're looking at cleaning up and embellishing a little bit in the current living quarters. You're using as much existing wall and existing infrastructure as possible, and then you're adding on about 1,800 square feet of dormitory space. Really didn't meet the mission of the department with giving them some better and safer spaces within that apparatus bay for, like we said before, the SCBA, the turnout gear, all that stuff still remained in there. It was an unsafe environment. That result was, like we said, about 1.4 million.
4.1 million.
4.1 million.
This also leaves a lot of current apparatus that they already have outside in inclement weather. All these renovation projects also have level changes between the apparatus bay and the living space. So there is some safety issues there, and bringing the building up to current codes as well.
Those dollar values do take that into account because there's lines in the code that basically state that once you hit to a certain level based on the assessed value of the property, you have to, and it's a specific percentage, I think it's about 3.5%, you have to become ADA compliant. And what we found over time is as soon as you hit one trigger point, it's going to hit you to the next trigger point, which is 5%, which will be a sprinkler system upgrade, then the next trigger point, which is another, which is 8%, I believe, which is structural upgrade. So right there, we're automatically snowballing what we have to do to just the existing building to bring it up to par. So then the other study was, okay, what if we keep the dormitories the way they are, renovate the existing bay, renovate the existing dormitories, and give them 1,800 square feet of apparatus storage. Again, the shortfalls on this become the living quarters are subpar. You have multiple beds within the same room, which is not encouraged, and the restrooms and shower facilities are not adequate for the size area. So we basically came to the committee with that information. They said, well, what's going to happen if we do an all-new station? And we try and maintain the program, maintain the needs of the department, but see if abandoning the old building and working with an all-new footprint, what kind of efficiencies we can gain. And what you can see here is that efficiencies is basically, we go from about 11,000 square foot building that meets their needs to a 9,500, just for round numbers, square foot building that's going to meet their current needs. So this basically gives them an all-new building, ground up, and it's a 40 to 50-year building from day one. With the other renovation option, you still are, you're bringing a building that's already at 40 years, sprucing it up a little bit, but you're trying to extend that life, and you're not going to extend it quite to the level that we would hope for. So this, right off the get-go, is all new. It meets the requirements of apparatus storage. It meets the safety requirements for operations with the self-contained breathing apparatus storage, with the mechanics room for maintenance, with the mechanical rooms, and the turnout gear is within an enclosed space and close to and within the operational lines for response to the vehicles. So it tightens up the building and it makes it work more efficiently for the department and then in case or in turn for the community.
I mean, the last factor is they also get to stay in the existing building that they're currently in now. There's no phasing of construction, which saves costs on mobilization with the contractor, and their operations don't get interrupted.
That value in and of itself, and I apologize that I forgot to mention that, but that value is in and around $500,000. It's about $550,000 just for temporary quarters to either relocate them on the existing site or even to relocate them off-site somewhere within the town. So we're able to take that money and put that right back into the building, again, to give you a longer life. So this here shows a proposed site plan. Again, these are all just the real early stages. We get the parking area that's required for the change of shift. We get the apron that's required to pull the vehicle out onto the apron and safely enter the street. Building located within that time frame, and we separate the public entry point from the apparatus and firefighter entry point, all in an effort to increase the safety, not only for the firefighters, but for public who may be coming to the station. These are just some preliminary massing studies that kind of can show you the shape and the form of the building. And then just a quick summary here is, obviously option 1, about 6.6. Option 3 is 6. So you can see just an all-new building is going to be more cost-effective for the community and basically for your bottom line. These are all numbers that are based off of early estimates. We hire a professional estimator every time to do this for us. She has done this for us for 20-something years within another company, but she has her thumb on the market, what it's doing, and they're conservative estimates to make sure that we're protecting the communities that we work for. She's trying to predict some of what may happen in the future within these numbers, but because we know when we're planning on getting bid numbers in, she can work that so that it's more accurate than as opposed to if we were going through this exercise and then not knowing when that end date was just yet. Good. So that concludes. Any questions?
Great, thank you very much. Thank you for the proposal. Larry, I'll start with you.
A couple of just basic questions. That's the way it normally goes. I just haven't
Lights
asked you. Are these costs inclusive? There's no other furniture costs or other things added on to this?
That is what we were talking about in the beginning. So we don't base these on we're not going to present you with just the construction cost and then say, oh, we got to add furniture and things like that. This takes all of that into consideration, right down to the back charges that you're going to get from the utility company for adding in a new electric service.
And you don't foresee any later phases? We've had other projects where we've come back and asked for additional, something happening.
That is the conservative nature of these numbers, is we're planning on, well, the goal of this is to bring a hard number, a bid number to the town meeting floor for the final funding of the construction. So that at that point, there will be nothing additional, no surprises in that aspect. That could be right within that 6 million number, a little bit up or a little bit down. We're trying to pinpoint that. I believe it'll be there or a little bit less, but I can't predict what's going to happen in May with construction industry. I mean, we had a project which was Bourne Elementary School that was bidding right when Katrina hit the Gulf, off the Gulf Coast, basically. And, excuse me, the bid numbers came in $3 million higher than what we were anticipating. It was just a happenstance impact to the market at that point in time, but we can't foresee that at this point.
And I presume there are no asbestos or there are, that's built into the cost, hazardous waste?
I would assume, based on the time frame of when it was built, there is some level of that. We need to get a report done to account for that, but it's not going to increase to an extent that is beyond what we have anticipated for the demolition of that.
So you have enough contingency into this to foresee that type of
Correct.
issue?
We have a budget line item for abatement.
What percent?
It's $25,000. It's not a percentage.
But in our
Not
estimates, we haven't run into a lot of things in a building of that nature. I mean, we're working right now, we're renovating Wellfleet Police Department. That time frame, that age of building is not showing as much asbestos as something that was built in the 60s or the 50s.
Thank you.
Thanks, all set. Julie?
So I think that a smaller footprint is great because overall expanding the footprint and really adding to a renovated building and then going to asbestos, I mean, that would be worse if you ran into asbestos and you're renovating.
Mhm.
It's gonna cost more. So I like the idea of the smaller footprint. It's probably safer to have that exit for the fire department onto Route 39 versus 137, I would think.
Without a traffic study, but I don't see it.
It's not gonna
as
be
a
worse.
Major, not gonna be worse, yeah,
Right.
exactly.
And then in terms of a new building, obviously, you've got, roughly a 50-year building. And we're talking like warranties on roofs and certain structures that we wouldn't get really with the renovated.
You would still have the warranties relative to the products themselves, but you're dealing with some sins of old. So i.e., you have a flat roof on there right now, which is a true flat roof. You have to make up for that with insulation. If we're not planning, and we've been directed not to do any flat roofs. But if we had to do a flat roof, we would do what's called a low slope roof, which is your structure is what goes up and down. It's much more efficient, it's much more effective, and it drains a lot better.
And then the fact that we would save on the relocation costs, and then our equipment wouldn't be outdoors.
Correct.
right? And that saves on the wear and tear on the equipment. In terms of the person monitoring the construction costs and such, is she also monitoring any kind of changes in the structural engineering costs? You know, the beams and such that can tend to,
She does a tonnage takeoff when we start getting the structure within the building. We're at a point at this point in time where she's just doing it as based off of a narrative from the structural engineer. He's anticipating so much weight in columns, so much weight in structure. So it's early, but yes, she does this day in, day out. Almost every single one of our projects is done with this individual, and over the past year, with estimates and bid numbers coming in, we've saved about $10 million for communities.
that's great. And lastly, two things. So if you have to lose the basement, but you have a higher pitched roof, you'll be able to save some storage.
We have, within our designs, and it's almost a second thought to me, so I forget to mention it, but we do plan, especially with a large volume like that, to put a mezzanine. So basically, we take advantage of the volume in the block walls below in order to just basically lay a floor up and give you some storage within that volume.
Okay,
So it becomes very cost effective.
okay. And just out of curiosity, I'm just thinking to the future, and I know they've lost 10 bunks, right? So I'm just curious what that would cost to restate those 10 bunks.
Well, one of the things that we can do, and again, it's up to the department as to how they want to do it, but those rooms are sized appropriately that you could actually do vertical bunks rather than bunks side by side.
Locker reduction, not
Yes.
Oh, sorry, locker, right?
David, just get up there, so the public can hear. Thank you, that's all right.
The renovation, we lost the 10 lockers. In the new construction, we gained them back.
Oh, okay,
So,
all right.
so that's a plus in the new
Right,
construction
okay.
also.
So, sorry, yeah, okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
So I just have two questions. One is about the cell phone tower that is there now. So what would happen to that during construction, and where would it finally be placed?
Our intent is not to disturb anywhere close to the cell phone tower. So we're outside the zone of influence for the structure. I believe that cell phone tower is actually lower than we are. And we're far enough away that it shouldn't affect the cell phone tower at all.
And then my second question is about solar panels. Is there any possibility to put solar panels on this brand-new building that is going to be,
Absolutely.
and kind of to, long-term offset some of the costs?
Absolutely. And the building will be structurally sound. It's actually required by code now that we have a solar panel load on the roofing. So it will be structurally sound to be able to support solar panels. The whole street front apparatus bay is a very large roof, gives you the opportunity. It's almost exactly due south. It's actually southeast. We can also accommodate that on the living quarters side of things as well. So yes, short answer is yes, solar panels can very easily be put up. The slightly longer answer is it all comes down to money. We could put it in as a design alternate or a bid alternate, but there's no funding support right now for municipalities getting solar panels up there.
Okay, thank you.
Don?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. First thought is for actually the general public, because I think it's important that they understand. These folks have been at the back of the line in the capital plan, and they've just gradually come up year by year by year. This is not only not a surprise, this is the way the capital plan is supposed to work, and it's been methodical. So I appreciate that. Secondarily, in terms of getting value for this, how long the building lasts is quite a different story from what Harwich looks like in 40 or 50 years. And one of these, the bays are smaller, for the truck, the door size to get in and out. If anybody in Harwich or in this room believes that in 40 years, most of that commercial property is not going to get developed, or that if we're successful in getting workforce housing in that area, that the load on the force is going to stay even, I think they better think it over again, because honestly, we're building something that if it lasts for 50 years, it better be functional for 50 years. So as far as I'm concerned, the one that actually constructs a brand-new building that can allow for solar panels, can allow for the department to maintain a workforce, which they didn't have when they first started, because you've got men and women who are firefighter EMTs now, so the quarters for them are upgraded. Just in general, in terms of what we're looking at for this to service, it seems like the $4 million option actually is a waste of money. You might as well just take it outside, pour kerosene on it, and burn it. So, A, thank you for being patient and waiting for your turn, and B, if we wait much longer, we're going to be looking at, again, at a building boom, unless we're going to take the poker chips out and decide that we'll gamble on 2 or 3 years from now, there'll be a bust and we can build it then. I think that would be a mistake.
Chris, do you have anything to add?
No, I just, if I understand the presentation, and I appreciate, Norm, we're asked to kind of come up with numbers, 3 or 4 years in advance without a lot of input or backup money to really invest in research. So I think that, when you get closer, you get more accurate, and, we're seeing that. So it looks like it's a 6.044 that you would recommend, because I need to put a number in the capital plan, so that's a number that is a number that I should carry in the capital plan.
For now, yeah. Our plan is, I know the warrant closes in and around February. We have a design development estimate that's coming up within the first couple of weeks of January that we are anticipating getting a little bit more firmer number once we have the design development drawings completed. So it's going to be an evolving process, but yes, the 6.44 or 6.04 is probably the most accurate we have at this
that
point.
number would be going up or going down?
Everything we're going to do is to keep that going down, but as I said earlier, I can't predict what the market's going to do, but.
Thank you.
So I'm just wondering, and you may not have this information, and Chris, maybe you know better, but in terms of having this newly constructed building that's meeting all the requirements, would we see any kind of reduction in our insurance as it stands now with an older building that or is it just a blanket policy that they probably don't break it down to that extent?
Yeah, they do, they assign a value to it, so if the building, and I don't know what the building value is now, but if it's a $2 million building and now we're putting up the full 6, we don't pay for those soft costs, really, it's just the actual building
Right.
itself. So it may go from 2 to 4 million, so I would anticipate that it'll probably go up, just because the value of the replacement of that would go up.
Okay.
But that's not a bad thing, that happens
Right.
in every circumstance.
Okay.
But I think having a building that, you eliminate any of the asbestos issues or these other issues is important too.
I think it's important too that we note that the bunk situation could also lead us someday to legal problems that could cost us a lot more money too. So I think we need to be careful to factor that in. And I have another question in terms of the screening. What type of screening will go between on the east side towards the bank? Do you know that yet?
We would work on keeping shrubbery, fencing, things of that nature. Something as natural as possible, although we have to remove a portion of the trees and shrubbery that are there now in order to get it put in place. But yes, there would be an anticipated, as you can see, this just has kind of color blocks at this point in time. As we get further and further along into design development, we'll have plantings located all.
Is there any of that, there's probably not any of that in a landscape budget yet, right? I mean, it's.
That is included
Is it
within
included? Okay, that's good.
some level of it. And I know when we did the police department here, we were very creative so that we could spend that much more effectively. I'm not saying that we can do that now with this project, but that would be up to the department and the committee as to how they want to proceed, whether it would be within or without. But
This does show the required offsets in the zoning
Okay,
laws. But we'll
zoning
do-
setbacks. Yep.
Yep.
thank you.
Larry, you got anything further?
I don't.
All set. So first, I want to thank you, Norm, and David, and the Station 2 committee for staying in front of this and letting the public know. I know you guys have been making your rounds. So that's first and foremost, thank you, so that we're not ending up at town meeting surprising everybody.
Thank you. Just real quick, Mr. Chairman, when we met with you, your instructions were, look at the wants and the needs, and don't bring us wants, bring us needs. And the committee has worked very hard. You've got a terrific committee, and we have done that. And I want to also stand before you, and this time I really, really, really mean it. We'll come to town meeting with bid pricing. So the taxpayers, whether it's up, whether it's down, whether it's the same, they will be firm bid prices.
Which you just answered my second question. So this is 100% need. This is not there's no wants left in this, correct?
Wants are gone.
Okay. Chris, to your point, you plugged $4 million into the capital plan, and now we're plugging $6.2 million-ish into the capital plan. What gives? I mean, at some point, when we go back to the voters, we're pretty consistent with our budget message this year, saying that we have to say no sometimes. Is there any thought been given to pushing things out on the capital plan that can wait? I mean, how are we gonna go back to the voters and say we need another $2 million?
Yeah, to that point, Mr. Chairman, I have looked, I think I provided some updated information. I do have a recommendation to the board that we will move one of the projects, $4.5 million, off to a later year. So I do think in the scheme of things, there were going to be anticipated to be kind of 3 large projects that would be pursued this year, the sewer project, this project, and then the Lower County Road. So it would be my recommendation that we go with the $6 million, estimate, so we increase that, and then we delay the Lower County Road. Operational concerns too, obviously come into the play in these decisions. The one thing that in the presentation they do have, just for folks, and I don't know if that was really touched upon, but they do have the tax impact. They went $4 million to $6 million, and you can see the tax impact for a median home valued at $348,000. It goes from $26 to $38. So, in the scheme of things, do you want something that's, do we want to be burning money, or do we want to use something that's functional? And for the additional $12, it seems to make sense to me to do the right thing. One thing I did want to just kind of point out too, that I've been kind of pushing hard on the sewer project. And we have 6 pump stations, and, to have some availability of a portion of this site to potentially put one of those pump stations in. It just, in my experience, you don't want to put pump stations on private property if we can at all help it. So I have been asking about if we could do a pump station. So I would say, I think this actually almost lends itself that it's going to be some disruption to the site, that if we are going to do a sewer pump station, that we could conceivably, that may make life a little bit easier having this reoriented.
Thank you, Chris. Consensus, or do you want to vote?
Thank you very much. And I'd also like to reiterate what the chief said. The committee's done a heck of a job, as has the ad hoc members of the committee, town administration, and Castle Booze. So thank you for that. And also request if we could have a formal vote to go with this approach for the new construction.
Thank you.
And just to the mechanics, just to remind the board, and really more so the general public, that when we do, there'll be a recommendation for a ballot question. So the ballot question will just say to renovate and put this new facility in. It will not have a dollar number attached to it. So what creates the legal limit, if you would, for the spending is actually the town meeting appropriation. So we'll have to do the ballot question will have to come first, but that doesn't have a specific dollar. But when we get to town meeting, we have a more specific dollar, that will be what drives the total cost.
And right now, all we're voting on is proceed with an estimate
Is to proceed with an estimate for the
for the
new
new
station.
construction.
Mr. Chair?
Don?
I move that the board support option 3 at 9,461 square feet with a total estimated cost of $6,044,954 going into town meeting, subject to a firm bid number.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Do we need to say new construction, or is option 3 self-evident?
That's the new construction, but you certainly thought that I said that. So if you want that in the motion.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. Next up under hearings and presentations is the annual meetings with the selectmen. First up is Board of Assessors. Richard.
Long night, Mr. Chairman. Richard Waystack for the
Yeah.
Board of Assessors. You have a detailed report in your file, but I just want to point out 4 items, Mr. Chairman, if I can. First, as you requested, agendas and minutes are being posted as required. The board is at full capacity. We are a 3-member board appointed by the Board of Selectmen. The attendance is exceptional. All members have been duly sworn in by the town clerk, and all have completed their ethics training. And 4th, different for the Board of Assessors, members of the Board of Assessors are required to be certified by the state, and all members are duly certified. Happy to answer any questions relative to my report.
Thank you, Richard. Questions, Larry?
None. Good job.
Julie?
I have none.
And now?
I have none either.
Don?
I think you're doing the same great job you were a few minutes ago.
Great job, Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Next up, Capital Outlay Committee. Larry.
Hi, Rich Larios, the chairman of the Capital Outlay Committee. Janelle, welcome back. Freeport. Maine, we saw each other in Freeport, Maine on
Right, right, right.
vacation. Couldn't believe it.
LL Bean?
LL Bean. I want to thank everyone on the committee first, and that's Chris Harlow, Dana DaCosta, Joe McParlin, Ed McManus, Bruce Nightingale, and Peter Wall. They've all actively been involved on the capital plan. We are currently setting our agendas and minutes. We lost our recording secretary, but we have a new one, so things are still being maintained and attendance is good. I just want to put the expiration date and appointed by, which is not in the packet I gave you. Chris Harlow, who is our vice chairman, his expiration date is June of 18, and he's appointed by the selectmen. Also by the selectmen is Bruce Nightingale. He's 6/19. We have 2 members from the Finance Committee, Dana DaCosta, who's 6/18, and Ed McManus, who also is 6/18. We have Mr. McParland, who's on the Planning Board, and he's 6/19, and he's also on the Committee of the Firehouse, so he's our expertise when we go to that. And myself and Pete Wall are appointed by the town administrator, are both 6/20. This past year, Bob George retired from the Capital Outlay Committee, and after many years of sharing his time and expertise, we want to thank him. He's done an expert job. We also want to thank Chris Clark for working with us and understanding municipal finance, which is a little bit different than corporate finance. And it's his charge to find the funding methodologies for us, okay? And I think every member of the committee feels that working with Chris has been a real pleasure. And we've gone through a number of town administrators, at least the 10 years I've been here. And working with Chris has really been a good experience. The plan itself, we've talked about it, you've seen it. but there's the committee behind it and tell you how we got there. Each department implements its own capital request form and puts it out for 7 years. We're talking about the first year being 2000, this new plan is 2019, goes to 2025. The result of the plan, and we keep on, you look at it every week and find out from Chris what's happening, but the official plan to you is in December. We have not voted on anything, so the numbers that you're throwing out and Chris's last comment about, well, he's thinking of changing this to do this and to do this, that hasn't come to us for vote yet. And as I said probably 2 or 3 weeks ago when I was in front of you, we don't always agree, which is nice, which is good. Okay. The capital plan also has the ability to consider debt service. And that's something that Chris brought in that we asked him to, and we do a good job. And that helps us keep that request versus expense sort of at that even slope that we want to stay at. The official plan will be presented to you in January of 18. Town meeting comes up. It's a dynamic, fluid document. That's how I can put it. So we will be working with it, have changes. We don't have to, the committee doesn't vote for any changes that are lower than the request. If the request is higher, then we have to come back and meet and do it again. I say we meet monthly, but now we're meeting weekly to get it done, okay? We want to stay proactive. We want to stay informed. We invented the bus tour, and the bus tour brings us to all the assets in the town, and we get to see why people are requesting certain things and in their terminology so that we can understand why they're asking dollars. This year, we've also asked to work more closely with the CPC in understanding their methodology to approve requests and understanding the request comes to us first. And then in the funding methodology, it says CPC. So if we feel strongly that something should be approved by CPC, we want to get in there and try to, champion the effort with the requester. We were talking about the firehouse, and we came up with a possible reuse instead of knocking down the old one. My number 7, and if you're looking at my document, says that we want to identify town assets in terms of possible sale or reuse, possibly the old firehouse, since you drive through it, could be a car wash or something. We're just trying to use our assets, but before you knock it down. We want to champion efforts to better maintain our capital assets. And we want to encourage the public to come in, have input to our meetings so that they're not surprised at town meeting and understanding what the capital plan is. The town administrator talked about the capital plan, a working document. Let me just throw out some numbers for you, and this is for everyone that's viewing. The capital request right now is about $41.5 million for 2019. Of the 41.5, 22.5 is wastewater, better than 50%. Gives us a balance of about 19 million in requests. We just heard 6 million for the firehouse. That leaves us 13 million. Of the 13 million, 3.4 million is CPC. The town is then requesting about $8 to $9 million, aside from those biggies. So that's what we're working with. That's what I present to you, and we're in good shape.
Thank you, Richard. Don, questions?
Semi-question, semi-comment. I'm wondering, how do you feel about the $50,000 threshold for a capital item?
That's charter.
Yeah, I thought so. I guess my point is, are we endeavoring to clean that up as we go along?
It's brand new. I wouldn't clean it up. It was at 25.
There were an awful lot of non-capital aggregations in the original iteration.
They're listed Chris lists them below 50 only so that we're knowledgeable about them. They're not voted upon. They may be capital expenditures, but the committee doesn't have to vote and recommend anything less than 50. That's part of Chris's funding, if he can fund anything under 50.
I'm just a little uncomfortable funding something that would be an operating expense that's under $50,000 by aggregating them, like, say, 3 cars become $50,000.
You'll see it in the enterprise fund for the water, and the police actually expense their cars. Those are the big vehicle users. In the fire, there's a greater than 50.
Chris?
But I agree, I mean,
Just, Mr. Chairman, one of the things I've been trying to do in my time here is to have a high level of transparency. So when somebody goes to town meeting and they see whatever, Article 25, and it's for a certain item, they also see it on the capital plan. And if it's above 50,000, they know that it was voted by the capital outlay committee. So this, for me, is kind of a working document where we cover everything. So I know, officially, I could probably do a version that doesn't have the 50,000 things on there and comply with the charter. But I think from transparency standpoint, showing people, here are the requests, here's how we're funding them, does kind of tie things out. But, certainly, if we wanted to do a version that was just capital outlay for anything over 50, we could do that, and then a version that shows town meeting as kind of supplemental information. Here's how everything is funded, and here's how everything goes together. So from my standpoint, we're trying to do 2 things. 1, comply with the charter, but also 2, how do we fund everything on all the requests that come in and not miss anything?
Thank you. Don?
Yeah, just to follow up, without getting too into the weeds with this, the only question I have is that, is it something that would be an operation override? Could become just a debt exclusion. And you do a bunch of those where you're really using them as operating equipment, and they show up if you're calling them a capital item, forgetting about where they appear.
Yeah, I originally I thought you were going in a certain direction. If we were at 25,000 and then 50,000, does it make sense to go up to 100,000 because inflation, things go up? So
That's a good idea, too.
That's kind of one thought, and I've seen that in numerous iterations in different places I've been. I think here, we do have the funding plan where anything that's funded within the budget or funded from free cash is identified. So we are segmenting out those small ones.
Okay.
All set. Janelle?
I just have a comment that I think is kind of interesting. A couple weeks ago, I brought up the idea of having coin-operated car vacuums at the DPW, and Michael jokingly said something about a car wash, and now you're proposing it. Sort of. I just thought it was funny.
For large vehicles.
And that's all I have. Thank you for your work.
Julie?
I don't have any questions, thank you.
Larry?
Good job, Capital. I especially appreciate the work that you and Chris are doing on the debt service, so we can see, because all of a sudden, we all are commenting, we have a lot of things going on, a lot of capital expenditures. So as much as you can use your knowledge of paying off debt to keep that level as your goal, that's much appreciated.
Larry, if I can just make a statement on that. The committee for years has always asked a question about debt service. And the effect on, I was impressed by Norm's presentation where they broke down $28 and $36 on the impact of a 9,000. And we've always asked that, what's the, there's a program now that's been developed online that you can tell if you have the average home in Harwich, what's the tax impact. I think it's critical, and I think we started it with wastewater impacting so greatly. Every project, and when they started the firehouse presentation, and the comment was, the tech school did a fine job marketing, and an easy vote. I think the issue, we fully support right now a new firehouse, but that's the problem. Everybody calls East Harwich the new firehouse. And in a mindset in marketing, you know, how do you sell and replacing the new firehouse with a new firehouse? And you have to, you know, the age of the building and so forth. And that's why we're concerned about, is the debt there, has it been, in our terms, fully depreciated? So in essence, the bottom line is you go with it, because after that, the life of that building, that asset is gone.
All set?
One broad question, if I may.
Surely.
We hear, you know, you always get this comment that the capital outlay should be a much more firm number than it is. And yet, as Chris and we all talk about, it's fluid. What's your comment on that dialogue you hear around town sometimes? Because I don't know
Heard
how
it at
we...
town meeting a couple of times. My comment is for capital budgeting, okay? Capital budgeting, capital planning, two different things. Capital budgeting is the effect of this year, okay? It's the effect of the capital plan. Any plan has to be dynamic, has to be liquid, has to be fluid. I don't think you can, I think we're doing a better job now identifying future costs that should be in the plan. There was a time before Chris, 5 or 6 years ago, where the out years were blank. And we put placeholders in, but they really, and I've asked Chris, we can't use TBD anymore, to be determined. It doesn't work anymore. People really want to see numbers. So I think you're right. I think we, you know, but it has to be fluid. You can't, it's not set in concrete. This year has to be because it's going to town meeting for the vote for those dollars. We're not voting the dollars in 2021. And that's the difficulty when people say, I'm voting the plan. Well, the plan really is this year that's going to affect us. Does that answer it?
That does. Thank you, Richard.
So just so I'm not accused of being selective enforcement on social media,
Please.
you have only one member of your committee is taking the state ethics test. Can you get on that? And
Surely.
Bruce is off the hook.
Bruce is off the hook.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everyone else needs to take the ethics test
Okay.
and get it to Anita as quickly as possible.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll mark that down. Thank you.
Thank you. All set. Thank you. Great job. Next up is Finance Committee.
Good evening. I'm Jack Brown, presently Chair of the Finance Committee. We have one member here tonight, Mark Amarez, back here. The other members are John Chory, Dana DaCosta, Ed McManus, and Lori Gillespie Lee, and of course myself. First, a little bit of a discussion about what we do. Under the charter, we have two responsibilities: administer the reserve fund and make recommendations to the town meeting on the various warrant articles. As to the reserve fund, with the start of the new budget year this past July 1, we had $125,000 again in the fund to begin the year. It may be time to take a look at that, by the way, since that's been a steady number for several years. To date, as of last Friday, we've had no request. However, after last Monday's night selectmen's meeting, the town administrator informed me there may be one or two requests coming along in the next 2 or 3 months. The Finance Committee, Town Administrator, and the Town Finance Director continue to communicate well with each other on potential reserve transfer requests in advance of their submission for decisions. The Town Administrator and FinCom have worked well together in discussing various financial managers during the past year, and the addition of Ms. Coppola has been a significant addition to the staff. The other task is to recommend on town meeting articles. Consistent with the charter, the Finance Committee considered all of the articles in the May warrant. Again, FinCom worked closely with the town's finance director, town council, town moderator, and article submitters to better understand the intent, targeted need, and predicted costs, if any, of those articles. The several meetings held with the Board of Selectmen, including the session of the one-liners, have been particularly useful, and we again strongly encourage their use. I know you've been waiting to hear from us about your 4 questions. This is a pretty exciting time for me to talk about them. Member attendance and absences are firmly in control at an appropriately low level. All of our members are sworn in. 2 of the 6 members of our committee have not, as far as I know, done their ethics test. Ms. Town Clerk's office confirmed that for me last week. So I'll be discussing that further at my next meeting again. And we are posting agendas and minutes with the appropriate frequency. I would like to point out that the number of FinCom members of 6 is 3 below the charter. The charter says 9. We lost Larry Ballantyne to the Board of Selectmen. We lost Noreen Donahue recently to a new wastewater committee. And we lost Rich Larios to the Capital Outlay Committee, which he enjoys immensely. This is a big deal, especially this time of year, to be going into the new year of budgeting efforts, working with folks like you. To bring on 3 new members is a daunting task to be effective. So this is the most concerning thing right now that I see. There have been discussions about this, and none of them yet do we have an answer. And there are people interested, I know. So I'll come back up with you, Mike, later on, talk to some more. The last thing I want to mention is the concern about certain of our accounts being properly funded. OPEB being the first, Stabilization Fund the second, and the newly proposed Wastewater Infrastructure Fund, as Mr. McCaskill is calling it. We have a situation where we have a fair amount of money in free cash. Obviously, the FinCom doesn't want to see that, get frittered away or anything, obviously. But it does make sense to put some more money in OPEB and stabilization in particular. I think the Wastewater Infrastructure Fund, the idea was to give it some dedicated funding.
Yes.
So that makes a lot of sense. We don't want to lose sight of that. That's all I have.
Thank you, Jack. Just to point out, the moderator appoints the finance committee, so we don't have much control over that. Have you sent him a letter yet? Charter requires that we send him a letter for within 30 days of a vacancy. I know we've called, but have you sent any letters out to him?
Nope.
Okay, maybe next step. Larry, questions?
I don't. I know they're very busy, and they have a lot of work ahead of them. So,
Julie?
Thank you for your report. I don't have any questions.
Janelle?
To the point about the moderator appointing finance committee members, I'm just curious if this is common practice. Have you looked into that, or Chris, do you know? It's common practice in every town?
Yeah,
that's the way done?
it's very common. It's part of the legislative body, so they want to separate it from the executive body.
And is there, in some of these other towns, is there a time frame for appointment? Because I know this isn't the only year that we've waited for appointments to take place on the finance committee over, several months.
Yeah, I think in my experience, the moderators tend to be a little delayed in their appointments, so it's not unusual. And some of these the vacancies have been since July 1, so some of these aren't, or even later than that. So some of these
Yeah,
appointments are,
I came in
the
May.
resignations have been, May, July 1, and then Noreen, I think, was
About
just.
October.
Middle of October. So, it hasn't been too much time. Certainly, May's been some time, but.
To support your point, though, it was only recently we got to 8 and 9, and now we're back to 6. So it's been a moving target for us.
So my question really is it something we can look at in the charter as far as putting a time frame in there? Is that,
Don?
and Don, I'm asking you really.
Interestingly enough, before I left to come here, we were talking about that in the charter committee. Some towns actually elect their FinComs, and we were starting to do a matrix of who did what and where, with an eye towards how can we tighten this up so that there would be a time frame, so that if a vacancy exists, that there was a time frame for to the extent we still appointed, there was a time frame that the town moderator had in order to take an action of some sort. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it is a big thing, and it was something that they were looking at. But I do caution you, the plate is fairly full now because they've got new regulations they were going to have to go through for the sewage, and there's a bunch of other things that are pretty high profile that the board has asked them to look into. So I can bring that to them as a liaison.
Maybe Michael's watching. Thank you, Jack.
All right, thank you.
Wait, I had one
Oh, yeah,
question.
oh, we got one more.
It's not entirely facetious, I'm just asking because it was of great concern to me when it happened, but now that you're there, I'm pretty sure I know the answer. How's the decorum going with the meetings?
Decorum?
Yeah, as opposed to, you know, like going out in the
Decorum
street and
is
finding-
about 12,000% improved versus a few years back.
Yeah,
I'm very satisfied with it.
and to your credit, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Jack.
Thank you.
Okay, next up under new business, ambulance waiver, fee waiver policy. Carol, were you gonna give us an overview on that?
Hi, good evening. Carol Capola, Finance Director. Back in 2013, the Board of Selectmen directed their attention to a policy that they had in place pertaining to ambulance billing and collection of ambulance costs. And so the treasurer and I have been reviewing the policy, and we have a few changes we would like to propose to you, and I can tell you why. I can go over just the changes with you. Would that be the most appropriate?
Yeah, start with the
Okay.
changes.
So number 3, the way that number 3 read was the town will accept insurance company, Medicare, and additional supplemental insurance payments as full payment of ambulance fees. And so we recommend that the Board of Selectmen consider revising that statement and saying, and changing, removing as full payment of ambulance fees and adding, after insurance payments are applied, concerted efforts will be taken to collect outstanding balances. And then that moves along with the remainder of the policy that talks about multiple attempts to collect ambulance overdue invoices. Number 7B talked about the Board of Assessors and their review over the financial situation of one of the folks that have received these invoices. And we don't want to remove it because it hasn't been followed, which it hasn't, honestly, but we think it's inappropriate, and so we'd like you to strike that sentence. And then the 7D is simply housekeeping. So 7D suggested that the waiver administrator would be the one to contact the billing agent for the town and to send notification to the folks that would be getting a waiver. We don't think that's really appropriate. We would hate to use your chairman's time in that manner, and we suggest that the treasurer take care of that for him. So those are the changes that we're proposing for you. I don't think it's going to have a material effect on the collection of ambulance overdue invoices, but it helps us in providing a clearer picture of what we're set out to accomplish.
Thank you, Carol. We had the opportunity to go over this 2 Wednesdays ago. I feel like our residents are still protected in this under number 6. It says, and could be sent to Credit Bureau for collection. And then as you read down the financial hardships, you still go before. It's just basically forcing people to go before the ambulance waiver administrator, forcing them to do the paperwork and say, I can't pay this bill, and here's why. So I think the protections are still in there, and these are minor changes. With that, Don?
I'm going to wind up being the heavy here. No one has greater regard for the fire department than I do. But I remember when Chief Peterson first pitched this, it was that this has gone through a number of iterations in this community. The first iteration was that basically, we would be reckless if we didn't go after the insurance money. There was Medicare, there was Blue Cross Blue Shield, and we weren't billing. It seemed like a good idea at the time. The public was much more engaged. We were talking about it for a long time back then. I want to say it was about 18 years ago, something of that sort, in that area. But the original policy was cast, I mean, given the fact that we budget for the department and the personnel, given the fact that we go and we borrow on debt exclusions for the equipment, this was augmentary money. And we actually said to the public, well, no one is going to be punished by putting this policy, but we're leaving money on the table and we need to be able to collect it. It's morphed through the years, and it seems to be getting more and more cold and bureaucratic to the extent that, you know, we don't care what your circumstances are. The total bill's this, your insurance covered that, we want the money. And by putting it in the office, it's even one more step. It's already demeaning, I have to ask for an exemption, but we didn't ask anybody to provide that kind of financial stuff initially. This is developed through the years. I'm not only not going to support morphing it, I don't know how we got here. It just doesn't seem like what we were promised originally, and I don't mean us, we. I mean the whole community, we.
Janelle?
I disagree. I think the changes are very logical, and like Michael, I think that it still protects the consumer. I don't know why Board of Assessors was ever part of this. It seems apples and oranges. And I know that we, as a town, are able to obtain a lot of money from our ambulance fund. And like you said, why are we leaving money on the table? So I disagree with Don. I think the changes are great. I support them.
Julie?
I do have problems with it. I agree if there's, money being left on the table through insurance and stuff, we should be collecting those monies, and I certainly know that our fire department works hard, and any monies we can collect for our town, we need to. But I would agree that, first of all, people are paying more for insurance, higher deductibles, and then if they're hit with this ambulance bill and their insurance only covers a certain amount of that, then ultimately we should accept that insurance payment as payment in full. I don't agree that we should then go to the person to say, in addition, you owe another $300, because I think that insurance continues to escalate for what you're paying, for what you're paying out of pocket. I also would agree that if you've got insurance and then you have somebody else who doesn't have insurance, who gets to come in front of a board to say, well, it's a financial hardship, I have no insurance, so I don't think I should have to pay. How is that fair to everybody else? And if you're not a homeowner and you're not paying taxes, there's a lot of different loopholes here that I have a problem with. So I certainly agree that we should go after, collecting those monies. I also think we should make it clear that, and I suppose this is probably HIPAA related, so we probably can't synchronize the system, but when people are transported to the hospital, they have to give their medical information. I don't know if there's any better way to bill, but I'm just thinking out loud. But I do think that there's a lot of different pieces to this that may not really apply equally to everybody. And in that regard, in terms of equality and enforcement, I have issues with it.
Larry?
Well, it's good as the board that we have a debate. I'm in favor of the changes. I'd like to make a couple points. One is we are humanizing it to the extent that it seems to be going back to more town involvement than was presently done by pushing it back into the town committees rather than the outside waivers and outside bodies. As with a lot of functions like this, I think it's reasonable to have people, if they need, we should be helping people, but we need to be sure there's justification for that. I think it's always good to remember that if there's a gap to be made up, is other taxpayers are making up the gap. So we do need to have, I think, a fair system to look at that. My question was more of, do you have the staff to do this? It seems like you're putting more of a load on your staff to get this done.
To write the letters?
To write the letters, to
To
follow
write the
up.
letters? No, we would automate it to do a form letter and then just add addresses. It won't be extremely time-consuming.
I guess I trust the committee, since we're a small town and the committee people live here, that they will take into account people's circumstance when they apply for, when there is a need. And otherwise, we should be collecting what's, fair value.
Go ahead.
So the only question I would have to that is, how do you make that determination? So in front of if you have to go in front of the board to say it's a financial hardship, what kind of documentation? You coming in with your taxes, or you coming in, how do I get to say?
We
I'm
do
just
that-
questioning.
It's not a board either, it's one person.
Yeah,
So they don't, it is in writing, so they write it and we read it and we take their word for it.
Correct.
Yeah.
But, Carol, will you just explain, so first, if there's still no response on the fourth bill sent after 90 days, it'll be marked seriously past due and could be sent. We're not saying we're going to. And then the last piece of this is that you file for the ambulance waiver. The way it reads now has led to, what do we have in outstanding ambulance debt, roughly? Stuff that we haven't, we make no attempt at collecting past the insurance company, but that stays on the books. What is that number, roughly?
So what's being brought before the chairman or the waiver administrator for, I guess, abatements or write-offs, is about $1 million. And I think the last time I checked, I believe that the dollar amount of outstanding receivables is about 1.8 million.
And that's how many years?
I'm sorry.
A lot.
I can't answer that.
Over 10.
Probably in excess of 10.
Right. So this would allow the town to be able to send their own bills past that fourth and say, I know you throw your insurance mail away because you don't want to see it anymore, but now if you get something from the town, maybe people would just write a check for it. If they don't, they'll be alerted to the waiver policy, and then they'll be able to fill out the form and say, this is a hardship, or I do pay taxes and I don't think I should pay this, and send it in for the ambulance waiver administrator to be able to sign off on it.
Can I comment on
Yes.
that? So I think that ultimately we're also we're thinking that we know how the person is reacting in the sense that they're ignoring the bill. Having dealt with an insurance company on a bill for an injury for my daughter through the school system, I can tell you that it did not get resolved for over a year. And the only reason it got resolved was because I was on it constantly, and it almost became a full-time job. So I think in some parts of this, where this money has not been collected, it's probably that people have sent their bill to their insurance company. The insurance company comes back. They say, we want an explanation of benefits. That's another phone call to your insurance company. You gotta wait to get that. You send that to the insurance you send that in, and then there's another thing, we need this. So ultimately, a lot of, I think, I can't speak to all of it, obviously, and it's about 10 years worth of bills, but I think overall, we're probably discounting how much our citizens probably do try to file the appropriate paperwork, and dealing with an insurance company is difficult. That's what I'm saying, is if there was a way to have a waiver to say to the citizen, if you need us to do this bill for you, file this waiver and let us collect the money. And that's if you guys could take on that role. I'm not saying you can, because it's a time-consuming filing process. And some of it is that even the out-of-pocket expenses for families are outrageous. So let's just say you have an injury and you have a loss of income even from that ambulance ride. So you come to the financial hardship thing, but you still have insurance. So you have to file that paperwork to try to pay the town, and you should. But ultimately, if it becomes a full-time job, that person's gonna drop the ball, guaranteed.
Go ahead.
I do think that, I think that this is pretty fair and equitable, where 90 days, you hope that the insurance does work itself out. I hear you. I've dealt
90 days
with,
is
I've actually
fast.
switched to the high deductible plan myself. I would say on a high deductible plan, that's still the obligation of the patient to make those payments. I think in this thing, in this policy, what's being attempted is to establish a level of communication. So I think if someone submits a waiver application and says, oh, the insurance company, it's their obligation, it's their issue, then we can send it back to the ambulance billing company that we have and have them reinitiate that.
Yeah,
But I think
that's-
really the point behind this is we need to establish a communication. And if we're not gonna be able to collect something, we need to have, the policy already has in there, the assumption it's gonna be written off. So we'll write off what needs to be written off, but we need to have a level of communication to make sure, what is the situation? Because you could have a situation where someone has a legal obligation if they have a high deductible plan, which a lot of the private sector folks do, it's their obligation to pay, but they don't want to pay because they don't want to come up with the cash or, whatever. It's still their obligation, and they should establish a level of communication. Why aren't they paying for that obligation?
And I would say to that, I think a lot of even the high deductibles would cover an ambulance fee. I think the ultimate problem is in the sense of filing that bill with your insurance company 3 months and then going back and saying, okay, well, here's our communication to you directly. You owe this money. I'm just saying that ultimately, what I see as the review process in that is not exactly straightforward, so.
Janelle?
But Julie, the town is hiring a billing company to take care of it initially and
Right.
bill your insurance company directly.
Right.
So unless for some reason, again, you have the high deductible or the insurance company is rejecting the bill for some reason, there really should be no reason for you as the patient to be involved in that process until, your portion, I don't know what it is with ambulances, because I haven't taken a ride, but maybe it's 80/20, I don't know, until your portion is due. Now, and then the other thing, Carol, I wanted to ask is, as far as the financial hardship waiver, I would assume a person would have to prove, maybe with a tax return, similar to like the Caleb Chase Fund, or, I don't know that an affidavit is enough. I mean,
But the town has not required anything other than an affidavit from anybody that's filing a waiver request. In addition, and I just want to point a couple of things out. So when an ambulance invoice is sent to an insurance company, if somebody has a high deductible, it's applied to that high deductible, and it's just assumed the person's going to pay the invoice, right? So they're getting credit for that $500 ride or whatever it is. I'm not sure what they are, just pointing that out. But in addition to that, since the Fontaine Center is opened, you're receiving a lot of folks not from Harwich. And so a lot of these invoices are not Harwich residents. And that's part of the factor of why we crafted the wording in the way that we did.
Thank you. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I wouldn't mind drilling down on that. The promises kept thing is really a bigger deal. There is not a great relationship between what's being billed and the cost of the service. I mean, this is usual and customary. I'm unfortunately part of a medical family, my wife, my mother, so I'm pretty familiar with the billing process for medical stuff. As far as I know, all of the EMT firefighters are in the budget that we vote on each year. This isn't about somebody jaking it and not paying their bill and their fair share, because whoever the taxpayer is, and I assume that any landlord worth his salt is passing through the cost of his real estate expenses to his tenants or her tenants. This was historically an attempt to take money that was on the table, not from people in the town, but from insurance that they held. We have morphed this into a personal responsibility. So you go to town meeting, we ask you to pay for the budget. And then you can go to the ballot, we ask you to pay for a debt exclusion to buy a piece of apparatus. Then we take you, I mean, I'm afraid the end point here may be people just saying, well, I'm just not going to call an ambulance. If it gets that extreme as a financial burden, that would be the worst possible outcome. As far as I'm concerned, the fact that there's an affidavit wasn't even part of the original promise. We have gotten to this point by just kind of adding on different regulations as boards came and went. I mean, part of me feels like that's why you don't necessarily respond to a government that says, just trust me, because people leave and then everybody forgets what they had promised.
Thank you. Before we go any further, before us tonight is to amend the current ambulance waiver policy. So we're looking to amend, and the amendments are out there. So unless there's any new information, I'd entertain a motion or not.
I have one question.
Go ahead.
I'll move that.
Well, you
oh,
can do
excuse
it
me,
under
go ahead.
discussion.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I move approval of to amend the ambulance fee waiver policy, so policy number 1701, dated November 1st, 2017.
I'll second it for discussion. Janelle?
So my question is, can we put language into this document that does require somebody to provide proof of a financial hardship? Because if you ask anybody if they are under financial hardship on Cape Cod, somebody who makes $50,000 versus somebody who makes $100,000 a year, they're both under financial hardship because they have a certain lifestyle they're trying to maintain. Everybody thinks they're under financial hardship. So I would ask that we actually have some parameters that are, quote, financial hardship.
I think we take that up if we bring this subject back. Well, not amend the policy now to add new things to the policy. What's before us tonight is what you're looking at. I'm not willing to get into what we're gonna require people to bring forward to the ambulance waiver administrator.
But
I
it's
hope
in
not
there.
to
It
Don's
says-
point, that moves it further away from
It really does.
trusting our people to make a statement.
That's
you
right.
know.
There's a certain
I'm
amount of
trying to
trust.
collect it, but that kind of moves it, for me, that, it kind of moves in the wrong direction at this point.
However, 7B says, in quotation marks, I certify under the pains and penalties of perjury that I do not have the financial resources or insurance to cover this ambulance bill. That's a subjective statement.
Okay.
So I can't, I would like to amend that. I would like to amend 7B to say that we require some sort of parameters that prove financial hardship, not just that a person believes they have financial hardship.
Julie?
I just want to be clear that I'm in favor of collecting any monies due the town that we can get through insurance or streamlining that process if we can legally, and I don't know if we can legally. Otherwise, I think this has a lot of different pieces to it that are not in benefit of our citizens, insurance or not.
Don?
Just for the record, so not for consideration for tonight, but if we bring back anything else, I would heartily recommend that we do consider the impact, because mutual response is not the same as plunking a medical facility in our town where people use it as a magnet facility. And we may want to consider how we deal with that, because they don't pay taxes here. They don't support the fire department as residents.
And we're getting another one in Harwichport, Outer Cape Health Services, right?
So Janelle, do you want to make an amendment to the motion and then get a second on that or not, so we can move on with this?
Janelle, before you do that, can I just suggest that my suggestion of amendment would be simply to cross out that quote, I certify under pains of penalty.
Mhm.
That makes it simple. It just goes to they bring a statement forward. That would, it's not a lengthy amendment then, just cross that out.
I think it's great. They're swearing that they're telling the truth. I mean, why would we want to take that out? Norm, if you wanna-
Chairman, would you allow me to speak?
Sure would.
You know, we're not going after a car payment here. Somebody's been hurt or injured and had to go by ambulance to the hospital. So I understand the business part of this, and I give Carol a lot of credit for doing this. But for someone to have to come in and sit before her to say, this is why I can't pay my bill, should be sufficient. Janelle, I understand what you're saying, but these people are in a bad way to begin with. And I just think we need to use first of all, I want the folks at home to know that it doesn't come to the fire department, it goes to the general fund. And to a couple quick points, the billing coming from Fontaine and soon Outer Cape will be very strong because they know how to code things. How sad is that? So I think if you have an administrator that can, a collection administrator, I guess that's what we're going to, Carol, if that's for no better terms, we go through a billing company. They're trying to be very helpful. Sue Pyers works as my executive assistant. She's very helpful to people. Sometimes it's just a signature. But some people can't pay these bills. So I just think if you allow her judgment, which is very good, and it's a difficult spot for her to be in. Again, it's not a car payment. This is an ambulance bill because someone was sick or injured. And I would hope that we wouldn't take this too far.
Thank you, Norm. And the ambulance waiver process doesn't change. They still fill it. We have an ambulance waiver administrator, which is one member of the Board of Selectmen voted every year. That one person reviews the ambulance waiver and signs the abatement. Some people ask for a partial payment. So some people openly write in it says I can pay half. And then I either sign it or I don't. I happen to be the ambulance waiver administrator this year. So the process really isn't changing, except we're giving ourselves an option to go beyond the bills that, allowing the town to bill if the town wants to bill, and send the waiver to people so they can fill it out, so that we don't end up with whatever million dollars in ambulance fees. And maybe along the way we collect another $250,000. Maybe we don't. So right now we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor of amending the policy as presented?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
3-2. Thank you, Chris. All right, moving on to proposed bikeways committee charge. Janelle, I believe you worked on this.
Yes, I did. So I worked with the former chair slightly back in April when I started the review of various committees. And then this summer I worked with the new committee member in particular to rewrite the Bikeways Committee charge. And we didn't have one really. I think it was from 1986. And it was talking about thinking about creating the Old Colony Rail Trail. It didn't exist back then. So they worked hard, and we had multiple meetings. I had one meeting, they had multiple meetings, and they came up with this new charge, which I think is just fine.
Thank you. Comments from the board?
I think it looks good, Julie.
I'm fine with it.
Don? I know there's some bikeways people out here tonight. Anyone on the bikeways? Was this a voted charge at a committee meeting? If you would?
Come
Okay.
up.
Andrew, you mentioned something in the hallway to me just about description. Is there anything? You all set?
But I'll defer to the
Okay.
members we have there, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Need a motion on this?
Move to accept the charge as written.
Second.
Okay. Moved and seconded to approve charge as written. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next up is a draft MOU relating to the comprehensive continuing cooperative transportation planning and programming process for the Cape Cod, Massachusetts region. There's a lot of information in the package about this tonight. Larry, do you just want to touch on what it is since you served on it before?
I didn't serve on it, actually.
Oh, you didn't?
No,
Okay.
did not, but it's a Cape-wide planning organization that we have a vote, and I would suggest that we move to have Michael representatives on this, to vote for their chair.
Nope. So they've made a bunch of amendments in this document. Did any board members pick anything out that you want to complain about their amendments?
No.
Is there any
No.
problems with their
No.
amendments?
No.
Okay, the second part of what was in there was to vote a representative for our region, and the one that's been nominated is Alan McLennan, who's an Orleans selectman. If it's okay with the board, I'll sign that absentee ballot and send it in.
Yeah, please.
Thank you. Okay, next up is the recommendation to appoint Robert McCready as Housing Authority's representative to the Community Preservation Committee. Don, I'm going to start with you on this one.
I just have general charter concerns, because ultimately I've been asking them at the last meeting to clarify either their position or the language. where we're at right now is we appointed Mr. McCready to a term not to exceed the May elections. It could conceivably be sooner if there were state regulations that got implemented and put a tenant in that position. We can't even accept this appointment to get us to our normal appointment cycle for the fiscal year, July 1st to June 30th. I just have real problems with the whole ex officio process. In this particular instance, we'd be appointing somebody for a period of time, even if it was just for this remaining fiscal year, which exceeds the provisional appointment that he received for the Housing Authority. I'm just not going to support that.
Thank you, Don. Janelle?
Yeah, I understand that argument, and I do know that there was one other member, Judith Underwood, whose term does extend over to fiscal year 19, the beginning of fiscal year 19. So she seems like the more logical person due to that same constraint on Bob's appointment.
Larry?
But that flies in opposition to what the committee themselves voted, right? Which seems to me we have some obligation to follow their lead on their vote. It's also difficult to predict the future. I don't know, Bob's here. Are you going to run? Can we ask Bob if he's planning on running to the, but that may not even be relevant at that case anyway, because you know he's elected, but.
Bob can speak. Bob can speak when we're done.
Speak to that. My inclination is to go ahead with the committee vote and follow their lead, and then we'll take it up if it was a short term. It doesn't change what we have to do to be a new member next year.
Julie?
Well, I thought that actually it does, because we don't, know what the state may do, and the term doesn't go all the way to the point where we need it to, whereas Judy Underwood's does. So I would agree that that does seem more like the logical fit.
So my sense is I agree with that, but I also, in the spirit of what we've been discussing, and we've been discussing new committee members and new faces on boards. Bob's been on the CPC, I believe, since 2007, if that is correct.
Certainly the right time frame.
2007, and I believe he's been the chairman for the bulk of that time. And now we have somebody new on the Housing Authority and somebody new to town politics and town government. A new, fresh set of eyes, fresh set of ears, and somebody that can last out the year. So I waited to put this on until I received the minutes from the Housing Authority on this meeting, so I could read their conversation. I think it's time for a change. I think it's time for a change on several committees, and not because Bob's done a bad job, but because we have somebody that wants to do it. And how long are we going to continue to tell people that the committees are full and we don't have a place for you? There's no rotation at all. And in this circumstance, Bob doesn't have a full year. He can't serve out his term. So that's the second piece of it. As far as CPC goes, last year Bob's one member of CPC. We didn't move forward with a lot of projects last year, and we didn't have a process last year that was easy for the public to follow. I think we need some change. So I'm not going to support this. Don?
Yeah, I'd just like to address what Larry said. I don't think we should get confused here, because this is kind of like a Senate confirmation of an appointment. There is no expectation on a selectman's appointment that a committee's recommendation has to be 100% followed because they recommended them. That's why it comes as a voted recommendation. It's up to us to apply judgment to that and either confirm it or not confirm it. Otherwise, there wouldn't be any language at all about the selectmen voting on an ex officio position.
And I'm not challenging that. I only want a discussion on, there's got to be reason to do so. We should listen to the committee unless we have reason not to.
Sure. Well, that's why I asked for the minutes and read the letter. Anyone wish to speak on this?
Bob McCready.
Bob.
The one thing I think I remember, I was at the same recent charter bylaw meeting with Mr. Howell, And I think we did identify that, that the charter does provide specifically that, that that you can vote for a longer committee appointment. This is the CPC component of the charter that still ends when the position, that the committee position ends. So it does handle that topic in the case of CPC, maybe not in the case of other committees, but in the case of CPC. So that's not, to my reading anyway, that's not a charter problem with regard to this particular topic. I guess that's probably the point anyway that I want to make. One of the other comment that came up in the Housing Authority when they made the designation vote for myself was that we did specifically encourage Judith to come to CPC meetings and become familiar with in mind the fact that that my appointment might end in May, depending upon a variety of things. And so that was a I guess a side encouragement that various members made as they have come to other committees to become educated on what the committees do before specifically running to become a member. And we did that intentionally to see if Judith wanted to get more familiar with the workings of CPC. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Good evening, Sally Urbano. I'm the chairman of the Housing Authority currently. I'm a little bit confused because it was a vote 4-1 for Bob McCready. It was a legal vote. Now I'm understanding that you, Mr. Howell, feel that that can't go through because Bob would only be able to serve for 1 year. Is that a legal thing? I'm confused.
Go ahead, Don.
In addition to what Bob said, there was discussion at the Charter Committee that ex officio literally means from the office, and that if you do not hold that office, you're not eligible to be an ex officio appointee to any committee.
But he holds the office now.
He does, but in this case, we're not speculating about whether he would be reappointed by the Board of Selectmen or there is a hard deadline. The appointment itself, the language of the appointment was for an appointment not to exceed the May elections or at such time that the state fulfills its requirements to implement the tenant representation program.
Well, I hear what you're saying, but it still doesn't make sense to me. He is our duly elected for a year to the Housing Authority. We're caught, and all of us, caught in this limbo because the state isn't quite sure how they're going to proceed. And so I think that Bob could serve at the CPC for the year, and we can deal with whatever comes. In the meantime, the Housing Authority doesn't have any representation on the CPC committee, and they're deliberating.
So I won't speak for the rest of the board, I'll speak for myself. The one point is, Sally, and I hear what you're saying, but he can't fulfill a full year. He has to rerun in May. You're correct, he is now. But our obligation to the town is to look at everything. And I'm looking at the fact that we're about to appoint somebody to a committee that can't fulfill the year, along with everything else that I said. And again, I read your minutes, and they're very vague as far as the conversation goes, so I really couldn't tell much by your minutes other than that you had brief conversation with both applicants, and then there was a 4-1 vote. But I thought it was funny that the board encouraged you to start attending CPC meetings. That's not a requirement that the Board of Selectmen has. It's certainly great. I spent 6 months coming to Board of Selectmen meetings before I started. You got on the Housing Authority through a letter to the state. Did you attend a lot of Housing Authority meetings? Were you well-versed in Housing Authority before you got on the Housing Authority?
I certainly did.
I think it's a requirement that isn't one of ours, and I'm not sure that that's what we want.
That wasn't stated to Judith as a requirement. What happened was, for 2 different sessions, Judith had questions about the CPC. She didn't know what it did. She'd never been to one, and so she asked all these questions from the committee. Then we had the vote, and then she was, I think, sad that she didn't get appointed, and she received encouragement, as I remember it, from the Housing Authority people who said, that'd be great, why don't you put in some time and then come back and then try it again.
Mr. Chairman?
Done.
Since I got brought up here originally, I do want to make one other comment. I did go to a number of meetings last year, and even if Judith went to meetings from here on, I've said a few weeks ago, and I'm in agreement with the chair, even going to those meetings isn't going to give you any real idea of what their requirements are to submit an application, because subsequent to Jack's departure and Bob's ascendancy to chair of that, there's nothing on the site, there's nothing voted that anybody's been able to provide me with that shows what are you required to do? What committees do you have to go to? So the irony here is that even if Judith does go to these meetings, they still have to come up with some implementing regulations that allow the public, which presumably could sit at home and read them on the internet if they were approved. You wouldn't need to go to a meeting. Right now, they're in a state of flux, and they probably do need some new eyes in order to be able to come up with something that's transparent so that the whole public can participate.
Well, I really have to disagree with you there, because I attended very many CPC meetings. I put through a few applications through CPC.
So you have a copy of the regulations to hand me?
They're on the website. When you go to CPC, if you're going to submit they tell you the guidelines. If you're going to submit a CPC application,
I'll
they're
let
there.
you finish, but no more back and forth. And the bottom line is, I think you've heard it. I am not going to vote to accept your appointment to CPC. So we'll either take this by vote, or you can take it by consensus, however you want, and up to the board.
Can I ask one question?
I have a procedural question.
Sure.
If this is rejected, as it seems it will be, what happens? Do we go back and they vote for someone else and they come?
Yes.
And then what will be the time frame of that, since CPC is acting pretty quickly now? Will that, I guess that's the
Depends on their
question
next
to you.
In terms of a revote?
Yes.
I'm not sure. I don't know if we're going to I don't know what we're going to do. I would ask, do we have a chance for legal representation?
So, Mr. Chairman, you know, in my experience, here you have a situation where a committee has submitted their request for confirmation for appointment. It would make sense to me that the board should take action on that committee's request.
Right.
If the confirmation does not go through, I would certainly hope the committee would understand that they probably want to come back with a different name, so they can get representation on to CPC, as was alluded to earlier.
And
There was a request made of the board, and the board
I want
probably
to
should
be clear on that,
just
because we do want
confirm
CPC
You can make an
representation.
affirmative motion.
Can I get a motion?
Can I ask a
Go ahead.
question? So in terms of the legality of the appointment, which was at town meeting, right? I mean, the deadline is the end of May, right, for the appointment. So even if we were to accept this, we could find ourselves in a sticky situation at the end of that deadline. If you, and can you explain to me that idea that it could be extended beyond that date? How could we do that?
You could.
You
You'd
can't,
have to,
right?
they'd have to
Have to be a new
reappoint
appointment.
somebody
Right.
else.
So that's, I mean, to me, that's a problem, so.
Any motion on this?
Why don't you try a positive motion if you can't get a second, and we'll go to the other one.
No, I think someone else should make the motion on this. I mean, it makes no sense to make a positive motion and get it rejected.
You don't have to
Might as well make a,
I move that we not accept the recommendation of the Housing Authority and request them to supply us another name.
Second.
Moved and seconded not to support the recommendation. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Unanimous. Thank you. Your old business, proposed sewer regulations. Chris, do you want to tell us how we got here?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to recommend, if I could, a couple things on this. There was some question had come up in regards to the sewer regulations. that we presented previously for town meeting last year. And what happened was that the bylaw that basically allows the board to authorize to have regulations was voted on very specifically at the meeting, the selectmen's meeting on March 27th. And then there was a public hearing on the regulations, and there was no specific motion made in that, as a result of that public hearing. It then was referred, and it was noted that it was referred, that as part of the intermunicipal agreement, the intermunicipal agreement with Chatham required that the regulations mirror what the Chatham regulations were. And so that did receive a favorable vote, and it was a unanimous vote. So I believe that as a product of the IMA, that the regulations were specifically voted. So I think what I'd like to recommend tonight, it was 59 pages, and I started going through, that just in an effort to educate, that maybe we can hit some of the highlights of those, and I'll include it either in my report at the next meeting, or we can have it as an old business item, and just talk through to make sure people understand that, you know, what their obligations are under the regulations that have been adopted. But I think, I don't know if the board wants another option here would be to just do a confirmatory vote and say these regulations were passed, but they were passed as a part of the IMA, and we want to have more of a discussion to make sure people understand them. So either you can do it under old business, or I can do it under the administrator's report, and I'll try to hit some of the highlights. Obviously, 59 pages is a lot of material for people to go through, but at least hit some of the highlights for what is the homeowner's obligation as the sewer goes by their house.
So we'll put this on for next week under old business.
Okay.
Can I ask a general question?
Sure. They are on the website too, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
Okay, go ahead.
At one time, I thought that we were going to write these in a way that, these seem to be, all have to go back to, as a regulation needs to go to the town meeting for approval. Good.
No,
Only
yeah,
the
we.
I misread
Only
that.
the bylaw.
Only the bylaw.
We
Okay.
fixed that
So all the
component.
pipe sizes and all that, that's out of that.
It's just to you guys,
Okay.
the regulations.
Okay, good. I'm that makes me feel a lot better. I was reading these.
Julie?
I just have a question. Chris, when you put that summary together, can you give us sort of the top 5 things that homeowners need to know? Like, when will the water flow to Chatham? When will the pipes be connected? That kind of, just so that everybody has that kind of basic information. Because I think as we get closer to it, that starts to be the more prevalent info we need to get out.
Yeah, probably for next week, it will be just the focal point of what the obligation of the homeowner is. The timeline, I have a couple meetings, so I'll get a better sense when we get a little closer to January 1.
Okay.
So I'd like to
Yeah.
just defer that.
No, that makes sense.
If you don't
Just,
mind.
just so that we get that info.
And that's what people will be interested in.
Right, exactly.
And the reason, one of the things I want to just, in terms of, assuming it goes to town meeting, assuming town meeting votes it and the voters vote it, the plan then needs to be submitted to the regulatory agencies. And, yeah, in my experience, you know, going through the regulatory process could be 3 months, 6 months, or 18 months. So, you know, I anticipate we'll be on the shorter end, but any timeline will have to just say, once the regulatory process is complete, and to give people a sense for that.
Okay.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've just had two thoughts on this. The first one was, in regards to these regulations, the brought forward concerning the, does town meeting have to change the whole thing, or is it being the bylaw, the overarching mechanism that has this as a subordinate thought? They would like, the Charter Committee would like us, to the extent that there is some master language, to give that to them. They do not feel a proficiency that they should write that, because they think that would be a mistake. They want to be able to have the selectmen give them the proposed language so that they could hold the hearings and then come back to town meeting with the findings. That's
Chris?
the first thought.
It just, last year, and to the point, I think Larry brings up a good point, the town of Chatham, when they adopted their regulations, they decided to do in the form of bylaw. So they have a 59-page bylaw, if ours mirrors that. So anytime there's a change, it has to go through. I think they're one of the few towns in the Commonwealth that took that approach. What we presented to last year to town meeting, and I believe to the Charter Review Committee,
No, we never did it.
is a one-page of, there's certain things you cannot do within a regulation. You cannot, within a regulation, set fines, and you cannot do a non-criminal disposition, I believe, are the two components. So basically, that one page had three elements to it. One, the selectmen would be the wastewater commissioners, and therefore would promulgate regulations, and then set the fines and set the non-criminal disposition. So it's very short, but to my recollection, it was sent to the committee.
Nope.
We'll follow up on that.
We'll follow up.
The second question, I guess, is to Larry. Because I've been saying this for quite some time. Even when I was off the board, I attended some of the subcommittee meetings in Chatham. Unless and until the town of Harwich adopts different zoning regulations relative to what they want to see happen in East Harwich, I was looking somewhere, and I'm not sure whether this is the place that Chatham used or somewhere that shows some neutrality, that you can't build more tomorrow after we put the pipes in than you could have built yesterday when we were at Title V.
We actually put
That-
that
and
in our
that's a-
CWMP.
Yeah.
We
that's a-
voted that as an actual item.
That's a different location. This only is the mechanics of connecting to Chatham, and the mechanics be sure that people then homeowners connect to the main sewer pipe. And so you read in this regulations that they have a year to hook, you know. My challenge was, because the discussion we have with Chatham is, they're finding themselves in a position that, because it's written as a regulation going to town meeting, that if they change a 5-inch pipe to a 4-inch pipe, they have to go back to town meeting. And so we really wanted to avoid that type of detail. You know, we want to put the structure in there that the homeowners, we have obligations that we have fulfilled. I should be there. The homeowners have obligations that fulfill there. In terms of net zero that you're talking about, that's built into the CWMP and is reinforced by the regulatory stance that we're working on now. Pleasant Bay Alliance, for instance, is working on that. How do you enforce that in a real way? But that's outside of this agreement.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I don't think the CWMP is ever going to come up in a planning board hearing with a site plan.
But the
But if
CWMP
there's something that follows on, I'm okay with
The
that.
CWMP is the initial stage, and then has to follow up with a wastewater discharge permit for non-source. I'm getting into the weeds.
So
It'll be covered
all I
elsewhere.
want to know is there is something else coming down the pipe
there
that'll
is.
take care of that.
Can I ask one other question? I don't know that we can do anything about this at this point, but I do know that Chatham has experienced some significant delays in getting their sewer installations because of easements. And they have had, like, for instance, I inquired about a property a couple years ago, I think it was a year and a half ago. Well, they were talking about the easements and the connections and et cetera, and the paperwork that needed to be done. Well, paperwork has just gone out on easements on this particular properties that I'm talking about, and there's still probably another 2 years down the road. So I'm wondering if there's any way, and I don't know if it's after the fact, but I'm just thinking, is there a way that we can be looking at that to help streamline it ahead of time? Because that's work, in my opinion, that should have been done prior to, so it could continue to move along.
Yeah, actually, to that point, we have had some coordination meetings with Chatham. That has come up. I think where they're seeing that most prevalently is on private ways. And the ability to go onto a private way, the town needs to secure an easement.
Yeah.
So one of the part of the projects we will have to do is start to research those areas once we know where the pipes are going, excluding the public ways and on those
And go
private
right to
ways,
those.
and see what utility easement rights we have to go on and do that versus what we would have to obtain. So that is a real issue. That's a byproduct of, there's a lot of public ways in town, there's a lot of private ways in town. And that's where we're really gonna run into that.
So I'm just saying, you know, maybe that's something that we can
Sooner better than later.
look into, right?
All set? Last up tonight is treasure chest. This is discussion only. Thank you all for waiting patiently that are here for the treasure chest. Discussion only. About a month ago, we tasked Janelle with meeting with Link Hooper, Chris Clark, and a member at least of the treasure chest committee. So Janelle has done some homework. I was involved in one or two of those meetings. So I'm gonna let Janelle open this, and then I'll say what my findings were. We'll have board discussion, and there may be some follow-up for Link Hooper and Chris, and we'll bring this back for any action later, if there is an action. Janelle?
Okay, so the first meeting took place, and it was just Chris, Link, and myself, and Michael popped in for a little bit. At that meeting, I was brought up to speed that there is a $250,000.
Let me just also say, sorry to cut you off, this is a result of complaints that we got about the treasure chest, just so the public is aware.
Right, why we had the meeting.
Why we had these meetings is there was complaints about activity at the treasure chest.
I want to actually say something about that first before I finish what I was saying.
Go ahead.
The majority of the complaints that we received were about a couple of major issues, rudeness of volunteers and/or committee members, we don't know who, to the people frequenting the treasure chest, and that volunteers and/or committee members were taking items right underneath the noses of people who were there and putting them right into their cars to take home. So that's why we had this meeting to begin with. But during the meeting, I was made aware that coming in on down the pike, there on the capital plan, there is a request for a $250,000 building for Sean Libby. He would like and feels he needs a maintenance workshop. And it was stated that perhaps the building that the treasure chest is in could be used rather than having another capital item on our plan, especially with all of the well, we heard the $6 million fire station tonight, we've got the Cape Cod Regional Technical School, we've got the harbor, we've got wastewater, we've got others. So that's just something that kind of struck a chord with me, like, oh, well, as a taxpayer, maybe we should use that. So let me at least do some research as to what the building costs are. So I did, and that came into your Dropbox, and I've given everybody a copy here, but just for the general public, it was not available until today, this information. Basically, in a nutshell, it costs the town no less than $10,000 a year to have the treasure chest operate up there. So that's just information I think is really important going forward as far as when we do need to make a decision if that building itself would warrant itself to be a maintenance workshop down the road rather than building a brand new building for our maintenance department. Other than that, I really don't have any more to report because unfortunately the meeting among the chair of the committee, Chris, Link, and it was supposed to be myself, did not happen because I had to work and it took so long to schedule. It took about 6 weeks to finally find a time where we could all meet. So Michael took that position and I'm going to defer to him for what happened at that meeting.
Eric explained a lot to me and he sent a very nice email prior to that. So Eric is the vice chair, or was the vice chair?
Interim chair.
Interim chair, okay. So, and prior to that, Eric had sent an email outlining what he had witnessed, what they had worked on over the years, everything that they had accomplished. So, I'll start with the treasure chest charge. So it's items diverted from waste stream and made available to those in our community in need of such items. Now that strikes a chord with me because if people in the community need it, then this is obviously a viable operation. So I'm not convinced that we don't need the treasure chest right out of the gate. What I am convinced of is that over the years, since the treasure chest has been opened, it's gotten completely unmanageable. It's such a great idea, such a great thing. So people are coming from Bourne, people are coming from Sandwich, people are coming from all over the place with their stuff and dropping it off at our treasure chest. Then people are coming from all over the place, other towns, to our treasure chest to gather stuff. It's been said, alleged, that people are taking things out of there, volunteers are taking things out of there, regular visitors are taking things out of there to have yard sales, to sell online, to do whatever they're gonna do. So I feel that we have gone beyond, at least, what the Board of Selectmen should be managing. This is a day-to-day operation in my mind that a committee can't run. Some of the problems that were outlined in the meeting and some of the problems that were outlined in all the conversations where nobody's in charge. So there's a committee, and then there's a bunch of volunteers. Nobody is really in charge over there. And again, this is an operation that runs weekly, and this is a Board of Selectmen that meets once a week. This really has gotten beyond what we should be running, in my opinion. Looking at the committee makeup, about a year and a half ago, we had an emergency meeting because the board that was in place, or the committee that was in place, wasn't the committee that we had on our books. There was a complete turnover in the committee internally, and we didn't know who they were. So not only were they not sworn in, there was no ethics test done, there was no anything. We were under the assumption that 7 people were in there, and those 7 people were long gone. The way that the committee appointments, I mean, the volunteer appointments work is maybe or maybe not a committee recommendation and then approved by Lynn Cooper, our DPW director. There's been no requirement for people to be from the town of Harwich. So there's no commitment here from the Board of Selectmen to follow the charter and have committee members be from the town of Harwich and volunteers be from the town of Harwich and have this be a service. In looking at everything that's gone on, I still think the treasure chest, or nobody's convinced me yet that it's not a viable operation and that it's not a need of the community. What I do think we need to do is we need to rein it in a bit. And I think that the 7-member board, which right now I believe they only have 5 active members, one member, the chairman lives in Maine and comes down and works. Yeah, he put service in though. I mean, he did a good job, and we appointed him. So ultimately, I'd like to see the board explore at least. The committee should be Harwich residents. The volunteers should be Harwich residents. We should start working towards having the flow of stuff come into the treasure chest be from the town of Harwich, and the flow of stuff going out be to residents of the town of Harwich that aren't trying to resell them. So in a nutshell, that's where I'm at. The other piece of this is to explore through Chris. Again, this is an operation that's open weekly. Are we supposed to be running the treasure chest? I mean, this is part of the DPW and to take things out of the waste stream. So there was a commitment by DPW. So I'll stop there because I talk too much. Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought that was a very productive meeting that we had on Friday, and just to kind of bifurcate things, that the committee and how the committee functions, I think is really in the domain of the Board of Selectmen. I thought it was a very responsive meeting, and I think that they're headed on a good path. The one thing that I wasn't really fully aware of was that Lynn Cooper has kind of relied upon everybody that wants to be a volunteer to just kind of come forward. He does some vetting and then moves them in and has them be volunteers. And the problem from a corporate sense, if you would, that if you have everyone that's all holding the same title of volunteer, you don't have any leadership. And that's where we have, I believe, a little bit of a disconnect on the volunteer element. So we did, as a result of that meeting, have some discussion. I've had follow-up discussion with Mr. Hooper, and had indicated to him that I'd like to have him continue that process of vetting the volunteers, making sure that we have the volunteer forms and such, making sure that we have an account of who's volunteer. But then I've asked him to pick a volunteer to be the director of volunteers. There needs to be somebody that takes some leadership. And instead of having paid staff go down there and constantly monitor this, paid staff would be available to respond. But I have asked Lincoln to go and actually designate somebody as the director of volunteers. So now that person maybe we have somebody that would be interested in that, can now kind of supervise how that works. There's a lot of elements of who schedules, who's there. You don't want to have 5 people one day and 2 the next. So I think there is a lot of coordination that needs to be done. And where they are a group that tends to be pretty functional on their own, I think just making this one correction should help in how the volunteers operate themselves.
Thank you, Chris. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The only concern I have with that is in visualizing this, you've got the town of Harwich, you got the corporate town, you got the Board of Selectmen who appoint a committee, and then these volunteers volunteer. It would seem to me that you'd be going in the wrong direction to deputize one of the volunteers as the director of volunteers. It should come from the committee because those people are appointed members. They're delegated by the Board of Selectmen. They have to take an ethics course and they're responsible to the town. They got to get sworn in, and that person should come from that committee once it gets functional.
Thank you, Don. Julie?
So I agree with that, but then I'm conflicted with the idea that, so we have the committee, it's part of DPW, it came out of DPW in a sense, right? So then, and I agree, we should have Harwich residents and Harwich volunteers and such. But I also think, to that point, we also want to restrict it to Harwich people bringing stuff in, because it costs us money to get rid of whatever doesn't, and that's being paid by Harwich taxpayers. And the cost, again, we had this conversation not too long ago about the cost of getting rid of trash off Cape. So all of those controls, I think, need to be put in place, but then I struggle with, okay, so if we're gonna have volunteers and somebody's gonna be the person who oversees those volunteers and is the volunteer chair in a sense, I would think that would come from the committee. But how do we then control the trash part? I mean, they kind of don't gel.
What about the plate recognition?
Well, that's what I'm saying, is like, shouldn't that whole part be cordoned off so that it's Harwich people going in that have a dump sticker? Or, I don't know if you have to make it a dump sticker, because I know not everybody has the dump thing. So is there another way that you make sure that the people going in?
So just a point of information, Link Hooper, DPW director, said the plate recognition thing could be a disaster for the gatehouse because of the volume of people going in there on weekends. He said he did set it up originally so you drive into the dump and you can make a right up into the treasure chest. So he could potentially do it, but we didn't really get
Okay.
there. Chris?
I just, maybe I misspoke a little bit. In terms of when Lincoln appoints people to be volunteers and to have a volunteer director, he would do that in consultation with the committee. So I don't think he would do that unilaterally. And the sense I got is that there's a great level of communication between Lincoln and the committee already.
Oh, okay.
So just to clarify that, we're not talking about having two different streams of information going. It would be coordinated.
But the reason I brought that up is it's not inconceivable that you could wind up with committee members who are being told what to do by a volunteer, just because they were designated the super volunteer. I would be more comfortable if that person who was designated that came from the committee, and then they'd be obligated to come in front of us every year because the charter calls for that, and they'd have to bring regulations that they might want to impose on this in front of us again.
Chris?
I think, Mr. Chairman, the committee would set the guidelines and make sure that we have the policies in place, and then one person would actually administer how that policy would work.
Larry, you haven't had a chance to chime in yet.
No, because it's a good discussion. Thank you, Janelle, for bringing this forward. I'm repeating what you folks have already said. The initial purpose of this was to certainly help people in need, recycle material, and I think we've all used it for that. And also to save the town money so that things would be recycled rather than get to the landfill. And, through the years, it's been probably our most contentious committee. Because, people, it's hard to be polite all the time when you're trying to move them on. We've had, in the past, there's been occasions when we've had people come through and sit there all day trying to take things that they could, resell. And it's hard to control that, and I'm not even sure we can. It's worked in the past when we've had strong leadership there. When Polly was running that, it kept it in line. I'm glad this is only a discussion, because I'd like to see more of what we're doing. I think, Eric, you and I talked about one time of, that we really need to have, not only leadership, but structures in place, organization in place, so that we know who's working where, and it works in a normal fashion. For me, I'm not, Michael, I agree, I'm not ready to throw it out quite yet, even though the building would be nice, but it fulfills other. I'd like to have it come back when we have a structure in place that we agree with, and some written policies that we can look at, and see if we feel that we can move ahead.
Janelle?
I'm taking the eagle's eye view here. I recycled when it wasn't in vogue. I'm a big proponent of recycle and reusing, but I'm also a single mother taxpayer who is seeing all of these debts coming forward, and the building makes a big impact on me. The fact that we might need it. So I'm being devil's advocate here. We talked at length about how are we going to control it to just be Harwich residents? How are we going to do that? Link doesn't think it's going to be a viable idea to have license plate recognition. So what is somebody going to volunteer at the gate every Saturday and Sunday and say, let me see your license or let me see your registration? No. So how are we going to implement that? Further, there are multiple organizations on Cape Cod, and a lot of them right here in Harwich, that fulfill the need that the charge speaks of. We've got the Family Pantry. They fulfill a need. They not only have a thrift shop, but they have a boutique, they call it, in their actual food bank, where you go get your food, for things that are necessities, maybe some houseware, dishes, or clothing, or things that people are getting at the treasure chest right now. So many of the clients at the Family Pantry can get things for free that they need there. In addition, the Habitat Restore, which didn't exist when the charge was written, is another place that people can donate furniture, and they will come pick it up for you. You don't even have to bring it there. They will drive to your house and they will get the furniture. You also, as a client, can go buy very, very inexpensive used furniture there. There are multiple church thrift stores. There are a lot more charity organizations that help the needy, I think, than there were when the treasure chest charge was written. So while I totally support the original idea, it has morphed into something that we cannot control, no matter how hard we try, in my opinion. So I'm not going to vote to support it, and I don't think the Board of Selectmen should be in charge of it, as well as the DPW director. It's too much. There should not be a committee and a group of volunteers. And it costs $10,000 or more a year for us to have this. So I'm going to be the devil's advocate and say that I don't think we should have it anymore.
Thank you.
I know that's a big deal, and I'm sorry, but.
So,
You make good points, unfortunately.
yeah, I mean, why don't we digest this? One action that we need to take sooner than later, so I'm not gonna let this sit long, is we do have to get our committee in line. We have to go back to Harwich residents for the committee. We don't have to tackle volunteers at this point, but the committee should really be made up of Harwich residents. And then I would suggest, if we did continue this, that maybe we drop it from 7 to 5 to make it easier to fill with 2 alternates. And I think some of our committees, when it was real popular, it was built up and we had a lot of committee members. But I think on this one, we have, if the non-residents aren't on there, we only have 5 anyway, so. Before I close this, anyone wish to speak on this from public?
Speak for a moment.
Sure. Good evening, Eric.
Good evening, Chairman, Select Board. Eric Foley, Interim Chair of the Treasure Chest Committee. Hearing what you said about wanting Harwich residents to be members of the committee, we did at our last meeting vote in a new clerk, a new chair and a new vice chair. The goal was to be having Harwich residents and them to be year-round Harwich residents. Liz became our new vice chair. Thank you, Liz. One of our most recent committee members, Heather, became our clerk. I had voted another new member of the committee, Tom Caruso, nominated him as chair. He chose at that point not to become chair. He needed to step away for a month or two, and then he was going to come back, and at that point, he was looking for a leadership role in the committee. So he asked if I would take the interim or the chair in an interim fashion, so I could bring the clerk up to speed on the duties for taking minutes, some of the administration and organizational activities that I could transfer to Liz and Tom. Because quite frankly, I've been doing all three. And I don't mind doing it. I mean, the treasure chest is just a wonderful operation. The amount of people we help is astounding. And I'm sorry that you hear of the complaints that you do. Given the patrons, the amount of activity we have, we try to keep it to a minimum. We can't make everybody happy. We do what we can. Certainly don't advocate people, either them being volunteers or committee members or patrons, taking things for resale. You know, I look at Pauline, and Pauline was always the matriarch, and Pauline was always, you know, you take it for your own personal use if you're taking it. You're not selling it, you don't. I mean, if she knew that somebody was reselling, you were out the door. And that's the way it was supposed to be. So whenever I tell anybody, well, how should you act, you know, think of Pauline. And we all remember Pauline, and I wish Pauline was still there again, because love the woman, and I have so much respect and admiration for her. And the volunteers and the members have come before me. I'm really doing all I can to keep the place open. I know the charge needs to be revised. I know the rules need to be revised. And you're right. I've asked volunteers to do things on site, and they've refused, and I'm like, what are you doing? You're crazy, you know? So, but there's nothing insurmountable. A little more organization. I mean, as far as I know, all of our members are sworn in. 2 of our members are currently up to date with their ethics training. The others, when they originally were sworn in, did their ethics training, but I believe you require it on an annual basis. So I've spoken to Link, and we're going to set something up where we can bring the others up to speed. And I've set it up such that, you know, if you want to take it down to a 7 to a 5-member committee, that it'll be those Harwich residents who are in charge, and you should be more easily be able to effectuate that. So trying to do all I can, and I believe the new committee members and the volunteers, they've gotten religion. How's that?
Thank you.
You know, you can speak to some of them till they're blue in the face, but before you put it out in front of them and say, here, you're going to lose this, I don't think they fully appreciate it. They fully appreciate it now.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you for trying
Thank
to
you.
organize it. So I'm going to bring this back in the near future anyway, so we can make some decisions. Thank you, Janelle. All right, moving on to the town administrator's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to make this brief because of the length of the meeting. Just on the certification of free cash, I think we had materials in the packet that the board had asked for, so that's just more just reporting on it. On the update on the sewer design, I think I may have mentioned this at the last meeting. I do have a meeting at the tail end of this week, so actually I think I'd rather defer that until next meeting after I have a chance to have an update from the CDM folks. On the green communities, we did have a meeting. Actually, I think Janelle sat in for part of that. I think on the green communities, we have access, or potentially access, to about $140,000 to $160,000. One of the things that they had 5 criteria. One of the criteria was as of as of right siting. That would be a town meeting. There's 2 things that we'd have to go to town meeting with, that's being one. And the other is the 5th criteria, which would be to do the stretch code. There's 2 board policies that we most likely would have to have adopted under criteria 4 for fuel efficient vehicles. and then on the energy, 20% energy reduction plan. So I thought it was a very productive meeting. I think it's, manageable. The last criteria is expedited permitting. I think that we do have permits that can be completed within 12 months, so we just have to get that documented by the attorneys, that according to our own process, we could do it within 12 months. So I think that, that is something that we'll be able to do.
Chris?
Just because of the product of town meeting, it's gonna take a little bit.
Janelle?
Sorry.
So I just have a quick question. One of the things I brought up was the solar panels.
Thanks.
And could we use some of the, if we were to get all the criteria for this, is that something we could use some of that money, the money used?
Oh, in order to put the solar
Yeah.
panels? They do have a description of the projects that they've run, so that would be one that we'd ask Sean Libby to kind of look through, and we did provide this list to Sean Libby. So if we wanted to pursue that, that's something that we would look at.
Being careful not to let me steal this.
Just on the, a couple other things on the, I will be going tomorrow night to the planning board to just talk about the pre-engineered building for the golf carts that we have. So doing that, we are asking for an exemption of the building, and then we'll submit a site plan for the full site design. On the Saquatucket, on the, I think I'd like to have John Rendon come in potentially next week on giving an update on the water side, the status of that project. And the board, just for upcoming attractions, the board kind of threw me a curveball by saying that I couldn't take the garage out. So when we had that discussion about rebidding it, so we have had some discussions with the value engineering, and I think that it makes sense that I will come back with a recommendation for the vendor that submitted to actually put his name forward for doing the project. I think we can do the project, including the garage and the harbor master and the boardwalk within that existing scope. So I want to at least have a more extensive discussion with the board. So we'll have folks come in. We did give them a heads up for the 20th if I can get all the paperwork squared away. So I think that's worthwhile to have a discussion on. And then I did present to CPC. I'm not going to be able to go through it tonight. On the prioritization, I did provide that in the material in the package so the board sees how I've potentially, under town administrator recommendations, again, town administrator recommendation, not selectmen or COC, I have how we would allocate the prioritization. And I did balance out to make sure that we are at an ability to fund on free cash and on the CPC.
Chris, I'd like to add that to the agenda next week so the board can weigh
Yeah,
in
go
on
in, go through
prioritization
that.
and give CPC our opinion.
Thank you. And that concludes my comments.
Selectmen's report, Larry.
Nothing tonight.
Julie.
I attended the Veterans Day ceremony, which was very well attended, and also the Cape Housing Institute. You did that too,
I did.
Larry?
Janelle?
So I have a little bit of disappointing news, unfortunately. I received about a dozen complaints this weekend because I was very involved with kids' activities. That the community center wasn't open and it was freezing out and there was nothing for kids to do. So I would like to bring back on another agenda, Mr. Chair, the idea of finding a way to have per diem employees so that we can have that community center open on holidays as well as Sundays. Please. Thank you.
Don?
I also attended the Veterans Day celebration where Julie did a mighty fine job reading her proclamation.
She was shaking, freezing, but otherwise.
It was cold, Janelle just said.
So on the agendas, anyone that wants anything on the agenda, try and get it to me by
Okay,
Wednesday.
okay.
Please.
Move
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We are adjourned.